Free yourself from those who don't value you. There are people who, because they love someone and don't have that love returned, end up subjecting themselves to situations they never wanted to be in. Out of love, they accept things they normally wouldn't, and after some time, deep regret sets in. Some people, due to unrequited love, spend their days stalking the other person's social media, constantly asking mutual friends how that person is doing. And when the relationship has already ended, they keep looking at old photos and memories, trying to savor those moments again. And even though all of this might bring a fleeting pleasure, in the end, after snooping on social media, asking about their life or trying to relive memories, the person doesn't feel relief. Instead, the emptiness inside them only grows. They walk away from it all even more sad, even more anxious. Sometimes it's worsened by guilt. They didn't mean to make the pain worse, but they did in an attempt to ease it. There are also people who, because of unreturned love, end up accepting outright disrespect. So many people out there pour oceans of energy and affection into people who at best respond with indifference, and at worst with real disrespect. Because there are a lot of emotional vampires in the world. There are people who keep you close not because they care, but just to feed their own ego. After all, when someone receives affection, attention, and energy, it gives their ego a boost. Some people, even when they don't reciprocate or feel anything in return, keep someone nearby just for that ego-stroking sensation. And sometimes, if they're feeling vulnerable, that feeling of being needed is enough to keep them going. That's why some people accept disrespect, are emotionally trampled or humiliated, all in the hopes of maybe, possibly, winning the love of someone who doesn't love them back. Today, there is solid science about the mind. There are practical, effective tools backed by empirical evidence. There are ways to understand yourself and to truly change your life. And the proof of that is this channel. Every day, we receive messages from people whose lives have been transformed by this content. People who found here serious, well-grounded knowledge translated into accessible language. But here, I face a limitation. If you're here for the first time, and this is your first video, understand that I need to make each video work independently, beginning, middle, and end. It has to make sense for both longtime viewers and newcomers. And that structure is useful. It works, but it keeps me from going deeper, from exploring the more profound layers of transformation. That's why I'm sharing the link in this video's description about pineal. Did you know that a single habit might be silently sabotaging your mind? Recent studies reveal that most people suffer from mental fatigue, memory lapses, and loss of focus due to invisible causes that accumulate over the years. Pineal Guardian is a program that combines cutting-edge science, practical neuroscience, and natural protocols to detox your brain, protect your memory, and restore your mental clarity. Note: enrollment is currently closed, but you can secure priority access by joining the official waitlist right now. Click the link in the description to access Pineal Guardian. This is a 100% online course, structured in strategic modules. Over 49,000 people have already applied this knowledge with real results. Ordinary people who regained focus, clarity, energy, and control over their minds, without expensive drugs or magical formulas. Tap the link in the description or the first pinned comment and start applying it today. The key to a sharp mind, protected memory, and lasting well-being is within your reach. Don't wait for the symptoms to get worse. Start now. This video is for you. If you're going through this, if you know someone who is, if you've ever been through it, or if you want to avoid it in the future, I'm going to explain why all of this happens, why these behaviors are self-destructive, yet so common. Why do we do all this if it only hurts us? And most importantly, I'll show you what you can do, how to escape these emotional traps. Let's begin. A friend of mine fell in love with a guy. Things started off well. They began seeing each other regularly, and she was happy with how the relationship was progressing. But after a few months, he started to grow distant. He didn't put in the same effort. He stopped replying to her as often. They started seeing each other far less, and that distance kept growing. That distance kept growing. The more she reached out to him, the more distant he became. And after some time living in that dynamic, she decided to ask him if he had any intention of having a serious relationship with her. He said no. He told her clearly that he didn't want anything serious, that he was looking for something more casual, and if she didn't have a problem with that, they could continue as things were. Since she was in love, and I've already said here on the Stoic Mind channel that from the brain's perspective, being in love is a state of temporary insanity, well, she agreed, even though deep down she knew that it could hurt her. After all, she wanted a serious relationship and he didn't. So they went back to that pattern of speaking occasionally, seeing each other occasionally. For him, that was perfectly fine, but it was slowly eating her alive. Every time they met, it was pleasurable, yes, but it also hurt. It hurt because she realized it was never going to turn into something more, and she desperately wanted it to evolve. There's a feature of the human mind. We desire what is lacking. Plato explained this long ago in a book called The Symposium. I've also talked about this here on the Stoic Mind channel. When we're faced with absence, desire is born. So since she already wanted a serious relationship with him, and he gave no sign that this would ever happen, in fact, he made it clear that it wouldn't, this lack created even more desire in her. So, within her, a conflict was growing. The conflict of wanting something serious with someone who didn't want the same, of seeking something deeper when the other person clearly didn't. This reached its peak when he finally decided he didn't want the relationship anymore. He realized that she was on a completely different page, that she wanted something he didn't. And once that became obvious to him, he sat down with her and said he preferred they remain friends, that it would be better to end the romantic relationship in order to preserve the friendship, and if she didn't have a problem with it, they could carry on as just friends. And that was the moment she broke down. She was deeply sad, deeply hurt. She began experiencing the so-called pain of a broken heart, something I've also talked about here on the Stoic Mind channel. It's the pain we feel when our emotional bonds with another human being are broken, and it's far from a metaphor, as many people think. When we go through heartbreak, the brain activates the same circuits involved in physical pain. It's a very real, very visceral kind of pain. There are people listening to me now who would honestly prefer to break both legs than go through the pain of a broken heart again. So, my friend, after the romantic relationship officially ended, entered that emotional slump we often call the pit. A few weeks later, we were at a mutual friend's birthday party. I noticed that all night long she kept looking at her phone and typing away. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said, "Yeah, it's fine, I'm just talking to him," meaning the same guy who had caused her all that pain. When I asked again if everything was really okay, I saw she was on his Instagram, looking through his photos. I asked if she still talked to him often and if she frequently looked at his social media. A bit embarrassed, she said, "Just every now and then." But I think you know that kind of every now and then. When you're close to someone, you can tell. It was written all over her face. It wasn't every now and then. She was doing it a lot. I respected her space in that moment, but I asked if we could go out for lunch later that week. We scheduled it, and during that lunch I asked her one of the first questions that came to my mind. That guy, I asked her, had he disrespected her in any way? She quickly told me no. On the contrary, he had always been very respectful. But you, watching this video, know very well that cases like my friend's, which also involve disrespect, are unfortunately all too common. In other words, you feel something deep for someone. You give them energy, affection, attention, and what you get in return is disrespect, or sometimes indifference, or worse, toxic behavior, where the person enjoys your presence because it strokes their ego. They keep you around, even knowing it hurts you, and often, they know it's hurting you. But out of pure selfishness, they still keep you there. How many people out there are being neglected, ignored, humiliated, disrespected, and still, despite all of that, keep giving their energy to someone who gives them nothing in return? Who keeps pouring oceans of love into someone, clinging to a distant hope that maybe they'll finally win their love? So here's what I told my friend, and what I'll now tell you, watching this video. It's the best advice I can give to help you avoid these self-destructive patterns that often feel out of our control. This urge we have to keep giving ourselves to someone, in the hope that they'll one day return our affection. It's often only hurting us. And the first thing you need to understand is this. As human beings, we do not have control over our emotions. You cannot control how you feel. You can't simply choose to fall out of love. And you also can't simply choose to fall in love. From a neurological standpoint, emotions don't sit within the domain of conscious control. And it's important to realize how different this is from conscious decisions, like deciding to order a pizza, picking the flavor, calling the place, or using an app. That's conscious. You can also decide what to watch on Netflix, whether or not to go on a diet, or even what career path to take. These are choices. You can control them, but you cannot decide to fall in or out of love. You cannot choose to stop liking someone. That is not in your hands. Understanding this is the first step in building a strategy to escape emotional traps. A lot of people try to order their feelings around the same way they choose a pizza topping, but it just doesn't work like that. You can't choose what you feel, but you can choose what you do with what you feel. You don't choose your emotions, but you do choose your actions. And sure, someone might say, I can control my emotions. I chose to fall in love. No, you either never truly fell in love or you're lying to yourself. Because from a brain function perspective, it is physiologically impossible to control your emotions the way you control raising your arm or lifting a cup. Even monks, who through meditation can slow their heart rate, they're not giving direct orders to their heart. They control their focus, their breath, their posture, and as a result, they affect other systems that are not consciously controllable. And let's agree, none of us here are monks. So stop trying to control what's not under your control. Have the serenity to understand you are not guilty for feeling what you feel. You're not guilty for being in love with someone. You're not guilty for being hurt. Let go of the guilt, but start realizing that you do have control over what comes next. Yes, you do have control over what you do with what you're feeling. So before I explain what you can do to escape these emotional traps, how to get out of this, I need to tell you how human emotions and feelings actually work. Because there's no point in trying to change something in your life if you don't really understand what it is you're trying to change. To explain this, I'll bring in the ideas of a great philosopher named David Hume, a British thinker born in Scotland who lived in the 18th century. He wrote a beautiful and profound text called A Dissertation on the Passions. It's a difficult read, like most philosophical works, but it's incredibly relevant even today. The man wrote it in the 1700s, but he could have written it now, because so much of what he says holds up according to today's scientific understanding. Now let's talk about that title, A Dissertation on the Passions. The problem with the word passion in everyday language is that it's usually tied to romantic feelings, like being in love with someone. But I need you to understand that in philosophy, most of the time when you see the word passions, it doesn't refer only to romantic love. In philosophy, passions usually refer to all emotions and feelings. So when a philosopher speaks of passions, they could be talking about anger, fear, sadness, joy, or yes, romantic love too. It's a broad term. Therefore, this text could just as well be titled, A Dissertation on Emotions and Feelings. From this point on, I'll refer to them as emotions and feelings. Now, if you want to understand emotions and feelings from the brain's perspective, I'll leave a link in the description to our very first video on this channel called What Are Emotions and Feelings? But I recommend watching that after you finish this video, so you don't lose your train of thought here. Now back to Hume's ideas. In his essay, Hume compares human emotions and feelings to musical instruments. He says emotions and feelings are not like wind instruments. On the contrary, David Hume says emotions and feelings are like string instruments. And you might be wondering, what the heck does he mean by that? He explains it in the text and I'll explain it here. Imagine you play the saxophone. When you play a saxophone, you decide when the sound comes out. You just blow, and the sound starts. You stop blowing, and the sound stops. The same thing happens with a flute, a trumpet, a trombone, any wind instrument. But with string instruments, it's different. If you press a key on the piano or strum a chord on the guitar, that note continues to resonate, regardless of your intention in that moment. It keeps sounding even after you've played it. Now I know there are musicians watching who might say, well, you can mute a guitar string, or you can use the damper pedal on a piano. Yes, technically that's true, but that's not the point. Don't get stuck on technical details. We're working with an analogy here. The focus is the reflection. So, again, with a wind instrument you blow, it plays. You stop, it stops. With a string instrument you hit the note and it keeps ringing. You play a piano key and the sound lingers. You strum a chord on a guitar and it continues. First the sound peaks, it hits maximum volume and resonance. Then that sound begins to fade, it gradually dies out. And of course this depends on how hard you initially struck the string, in the case of a guitar, or pressed the key, in the case of a piano. Whatever the string instrument may be, harp, bass, ukulele, it doesn't matter. The point is, when that initial impact is strong, the resulting sound will have a strong peak, which will then slowly fade away. But if you barely touch the string, the initial sound will be much weaker, and it will fade away even faster. In other words, the sound will die out quickly. And now we can talk about emotions and feelings, because ultimately, and this is backed by scientific studies, emotions and feelings function very similarly. As I explained in our other video, which I encourage you to watch after this one, emotions and feelings are triggered by stimuli. In the case of romantic passion, the stimulus is the person themselves. It's what they say to you, their tone of voice, the sound of their voice, their perfume, the messages they send you. All of this, the person and everything that comes from them and reaches you through your senses. These are the stimuli that strike the strings of your emotional instrument. Now here's what's interesting. Sometimes you strike those strings hard and sometimes lightly. For example, think about what you felt the moment your child was born when you held them for the first time. That's an emotion with a very strong strike to your emotional strings. A powerful emotional peak. So strong, in fact, that it takes years, maybe a lifetime, for it to fade. And even then, it may never fade entirely. Now compare that with something like road rage. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you feel anger. That's also a strike to your emotional instrument, but a much lighter one. There's a brief peak of anger and then it passes. Sometimes, by the time you reach your destination, you've already forgotten about it. So, the intensity of an emotion varies. Some stimuli generate extremely strong emotions, while others trigger feelings that are much milder and fade more quickly, just like sounds on a string instrument. And of course, in Hume's analogy, there's the implicit idea that we do not control when our emotions will stop. That's crucial. Emotions will linger in you for a while, no matter which emotion it is. Many times, for example, when you're angry, the best thing to do is remove yourself from the situation and wait for that emotional note to stop playing, so you can regain your rationality and, say, return to a discussion where you lost your temper and ended up being rude to someone you didn't mean to hurt. Understanding that emotions come with intensity and take time to fade is essential for managing anything in life that involves feelings. Let's go back to the example of romantic passion. When you're in love with someone, that person is a stimulus that triggers an emotion, an intense emotion. And if you've ever been in love, you know how strong it is. The younger you are, the more intense that emotion tends to be. So the younger you are, the harder the strike on that emotional instrument. But passion, in general, tends to be intense throughout life. The person you're in love with is a stimulus, and everything that comes from them and reaches your senses keeps striking those same emotional strings. That's why you end up reactivating the feeling of passion through many channels. When you walk past someone wearing their perfume, when they send you a message, when they say something sweet to you, when you see them in a photo, all of that strikes your emotional instrument again and reignites or intensifies the emotion and feeling you have for that person. And it's important to understand this. The stimulus that triggers, intensifies, or maintains a feeling can also be mental content, like a memory. Just remembering the person you're in love with can strike the strings of your emotional instrument. It brings the emotion back to the surface and strengthens its intensity, keeping it alive inside you for a while longer. It's the same when you remember someone who hurt you. The emotion resurfaces. Now, I'm talking about passion here because it's the focus of this video, but everything I've said applies to all emotions and feelings. So what have we seen so far? We've seen that emotions and feelings in general are caused by stimuli, and those stimuli can come from the outside world, or they can come from your own mind, memories, thoughts, and ideas. And when it comes to romantic passion specifically, every time you see the person you're in love with, every time they message you, every time you smell their perfume, every time you see a photo of them, every time you check their Instagram or Facebook, every time someone mentions them to you, all of that is stimulus, and all of that strikes the strings of your emotional instrument. It feeds the emotion you feel. It intensifies the feeling of passion. And now you understand why so many people end up subjecting themselves to situations they don't want to be in, especially in unrequited relationships. They give so much. They pour energy, love, attention, and receive almost nothing in return. And still, they find themselves checking that person's social media, asking mutual friends how that person is doing. Often, the person will even tolerate disrespect. So, why do they do all of this? Now you already have the tools to understand why this happens. As I said, all of this is stimulus, a stimulus that feeds the emotion you feel inside. When you're in love with someone, even the smallest interactions, the emotional crumbs they give you, trigger small pleasures, brief moments of joy, tiny fragments of comfort. After all, you have strong feelings for this person. You desire them deeply. So even the slightest contact, no matter how minimal, generates small emotional responses inside you. And yes, these are generally positive feelings, little sparks of happiness or warmth. But here's the problem. From a neurological point of view, nothing stops two conflicting emotions from existing inside you at the same time. For example, you can feel the immense pleasure of eating a delicious dessert, while simultaneously feeling guilty because you know it's unhealthy. Or you can enjoy the comfort of sleeping in a little longer, while at the same time feeling anxious that you might be late for work. It is completely natural for contradictory feelings to coexist inside us. This happens to everyone, every single day. You're not weird or broken because it happens to you. The real challenge is how we handle this inner contradiction. That's all we can do, because when we let the wrong emotion win, we often end up harming ourselves. Take the example of letting the fear of being late win. You harm your job, your future, or letting the pleasure of unhealthy food win. You harm your health. It all depends on which emotions prevail inside you. This is exactly what happens with people who chase micro-pleasures, those emotional crumbs thrown at them in an unrequited love. As I said, those tiny moments of contact are emotional sparks. They bring positive feelings of joy, comfort, maybe even excitement. But because our emotions are often conflicted, along with those small pleasures come strong negative emotions. You feel happy from the crumb of affection, but you also feel anguish, because deep down, you know crumbs are all you'll ever get. You feel sadness for realizing you're lowering yourself for scraps of attention. You feel guilt for continuing to do this, for not walking away, and that guilt starts to damage your self-esteem. In other words, in exchange for tiny sparks of positive emotion, you're feeding much bigger negative ones. You want more. You crave a real connection. You dream of a time when this person will finally see your value. So you stay. You keep giving your energy, your affection, your love, but they don't reciprocate. And deep down, you know they probably never will. And then comes the guilt. Guilt for going back to something you swore you wouldn't. Guilt for not being able to move on, no matter how hard you try. Guilt for this emotional dependency that seems to have taken hold inside you. And as time passes, the emotional notes from those crumbs fade quickly. After all, they were weak to begin with, just crumbs. So the pleasure disappears almost instantly. But what stays? All those negative emotions, the guilt, the sadness, they were already there, and now they intensify. Worse than guilt is the emptiness left behind, the absence of someone you wanted so badly to care about you the way you care about them. That emptiness triggers another deeply human feeling, loneliness. You feel alone, isolated, and that's a very powerful feeling for us as human beings. So what happens next? The relapse. Consciously or unconsciously, you know that if you send a message, if you check their social media, if you allow yourself one more time to accept those emotional crumbs, even if just a little bit, you'll feel that same small hit of pleasure. It'll strike those emotional strings again. And because you're feeling deep loneliness, because you're aching with emptiness, because you miss that person desperately, you fall into the trap again. You give so much, you receive so little, you take the crumbs, you feel the tiny high. Then, once again, you feel guilt, you feel sadness, you feel anguish. The crumbs vanish quickly, the anguish grows, the loneliness deepens, the emptiness spreads, and then, consciously or unconsciously, you go back again, and now you see the pattern. It's a vicious cycle. Many people live trapped in this cycle. Guilt, loneliness, craving, crumbs, guilt again, loneliness again. It's like a dog chasing its tail. Sadly, many people fall into this emotional trap. And again, let me repeat, this is not your fault. Most of the time you didn't even understand what was happening inside you. Maybe now, but after this explanation, things are a little clearer. It's important that you become aware of this. That's the first step, becoming aware. So that now we can start talking about what you can actually do to escape these traps, so you can truly get out of this. But before we continue, I want to ask you for a small favor. This video was published on March 1st, 2020, right after my birthday. My birthday is on February 28th. Actually, right now, as I'm recording this, it's the evening of February 27th. I'm filming this just before my birthday because I didn't want to leave you without a new video, even though my days have been really hectic. So, if I may, I'd like to ask you for a small gift. Right now, this channel has a little over 900,000 subscribers, so I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel. It's a small gesture, it costs you nothing, and it helps us immensely. I would be truly grateful if you could give me that small birthday gift. We're on our way to reaching 1 million subscribers, and that will be a big moment for us. A milestone for a project that we've been working on for years, trying to bring knowledge to Brazil and beyond. Reaching that 1 million is a powerful symbol that this work is meaningful, that it's making a real difference in people's lives. So please, subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, you can click the bell icon below, because unfortunately, YouTube doesn't notify all subscribers when we post a new video. But by clicking the bell, you ensure you'll get a notification when something new is released. I don't post many videos, one every 2 weeks at most, so don't worry, your inbox won't be flooded with videos from the Stoic Mind channel. And now, let's get back to the topic of today's video. That deep loneliness you feel, the growing emptiness inside you, creates distress. And that distress leads you, consciously or unconsciously, to seek out those emotional crumbs, because they at least bring a brief moment of emotional relief. To begin reversing this situation, the first thing you need to do is internalize two very important ideas. First, even when you're alone, you still have yourself. You will always have yourself. The relationship you have with yourself is the first relationship you must nurture and care for. If you are not comfortable and secure in your own presence, it will be very difficult for others to truly respect you or genuinely want to be by your side. The more you accept emotional crumbs, the more you humiliate yourself before someone who treats you with indifference or even disrespect, the less you value yourself, and people pick up on that. And when they do, especially emotional vampires, the toxic, the selfish, they will exploit it. They will step all over you. They will take advantage of your kindness. They will disrespect you even more. So respect yourself. Internalize this. You are never truly alone because you always have you. And the more you stand with yourself, the more likely it is that others will also want to stand beside you. Second, have the emotional maturity to understand that just as you cannot control how you feel, other people cannot control how they feel either. If you love someone, if you're in love and they don't feel the same, it's not your fault, but it's also not their fault for not returning that feeling. Just like you, they can only be blamed, and I want you to put quotes around that word, for what they do with the feelings they have or don't have toward you. There are people who act terribly with the love you give them, but take, for example, my friend's situation. In her case, the guy had never disrespected her. He just wanted something different than what she wanted. To stay close to him, she began accepting what for her were crumbs. But for him, that was simply the most he had to offer. Those short conversations, those small interactions, they didn't mean much to him. It was exactly what he wanted. But to her, it meant everything. It was the world. He would leave those chats feeling fine. She, on the other hand, would leave devastated, hurting even more, feeling even more attached. So by maintaining that contact, she was feeding her own distress, and that distress only grew over time. It was the same when she'd go scrolling through his Instagram, checking his social media, searching for any sign of him. And again, I say this with all care, we must have the maturity to understand that sometimes our feelings simply won't be reciprocated. That is not the other person's fault. That is not your fault. Because it's very difficult, maybe even impossible, to assign blame to a feeling or an emotion. What really happens in these situations is this: there is a spark, a glimmer of hope. Many people who subject themselves to this dynamic do so because they hold on to a tiny hope that, by enduring the pain, by proving their love, they will eventually change the situation, that the tables will turn, that one day, that person will recognize their worth and finally return their love. But in these moments, I urge you, try your best to be rational. Look at the concrete evidence. Is this person giving you any real sign, any meaningful evidence that they will one day love you back? Or are you just inventing that possibility in your head? Are you building a fantasy based on nothing while all the evidence shows they never will? Be honest with yourself. Is this hope grounded in reality? Or are you just blinded by emotion? That's a common effect of passion. And I repeat, passion is a temporary state of madness. Your decision-making gets compromised when you're in love. That's why it's so important to stop and assess things clearly. And this is where having good friends close to you matters so much. People who are outside the situation. People who can see clearly, who can help you analyze what's really going on. Because when you're blinded by emotion, you often can't see the truth, even when it's right in front of you. So surround yourself with good people, people who love you, people who will tell you what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear, people who have the courage to tell you something you often don't want to hear, but need to hear. And here's something else that's worth becoming aware of. Everything we experience is filtered through our expectations. There are many people who, due to low self-esteem, naivety, self-deception, or emotional blindness, pour an immense amount of energy into people who have no intention whatsoever of returning that energy in the way we wish they would. In these cases, we fight for the admiration of people who only ignore us. We chase love where there's only friendship, or sometimes not even that. We give our hearts as friends to people who only want to be acquaintances, or less. So I ask you, how many oceans have you poured into people who only wanted fields and mountains? How much of your energy has been wasted on relationships and people who never had the slightest intention of giving back what you were hoping for? And that's assuming a respectful relationship. But as we both know, many times that's not the case. Sometimes you're giving your all to someone who not only wants something completely different from you, but who also abuses your emotions and feelings, out of pure selfishness or narcissism. People who suck it all out of you because it feeds their ego. They keep you close to feel important, to have someone at their disposal during their own moments of insecurity. But when it's time to reciprocate, there's nothing. At best, they ignore you. At worst, they manipulate, take advantage, or show complete indifference toward who you are. And still, you stay. You keep banging your head against the wall, chasing your own tail, engaging in a self-destructive behavior pattern. But if you want to change this, the first step is to become aware of it. Because in these cases, know this: you are acting as someone's emotional trash can. I know it's hard to hear. I know it's painful, but that's the truth. Stop acting as someone else's emotional garbage bin. Stop accepting crumbs. Stop investing in things that don't value you back. Stop suffering for people who can't see your worth. The world is way too big. There are so many people out there, and sometimes we forget to give our energy to the ones who truly deserve it. Unfortunately, the brain works like this. We often crave what we can't have, and once we have something, we stop craving it, we stop appreciating it, and because of that, we sometimes stop giving love and care to the people who truly deserve it. People who do reciprocate, who care about us, who invest in us the same way we invest in them. We ignore these people to chase those who hurt us. There's a writer named Lewis who said something like this: "We never have time for our friends, but for our enemies, we have all the time in the world." Let that sink in. Your time is precious. So how can you accept pouring your time, your love, your energy into someone who is only making you suffer? And that's when you scream at your phone screen, or your TV, or your computer. "But Pedro, what do I do? I'm living this. I want to stop. How do I get out?" Let me give you some advice. Don't isolate yourself. Don't push away your friends. Don't withdraw from the relationships that have true value in your life, because those relationships will be your support network to help you through this difficult time. Often, when we're down in the dumps, we stay home listening to sad music, and we push people away. We don't want to go out. We isolate. But this is exactly the time to resist that impulse. I'm not saying you should go out partying. You don't need to force yourself into loud, festive environments. Your emotional state might not be ready for that. Instead, I recommend something more intimate. Invite a friend for dinner. Have a coffee. Something quieter. Something you feel safe in. That way, you won't have to fake a smile. You won't have to pretend you're happy around people you barely know. No, call someone who really matters to you. Someone you love. Invite them to your place for coffee, pizza, to watch a show. Go out to dinner, face to face, because presence matters. Texts are not enough. Being physically with people who care about you can soothe that loneliness inside, even if not completely. Because yes, you are feeling lonely due to this unrequited love. But spending time with real friends, with people who truly care, helps ease that pain. When we're near those we love, when we are truly heard, that heals us, even just a little. Negative impact of these emotions and the pain we are feeling. Then comes the second tip I give you. Create mechanisms that make it difficult for you to touch the strings of your emotional instrument for this person. In other words, don't make it easy to contact them, to know what's happening in their life, or to check on them, because it's like keeping a cabinet full of chocolate while on a diet. If your cupboard is full of chocolate, eventually you'll fall off the wagon and overindulge in what you're trying to avoid. In relationships, this often means respectfully telling the other person, if they treat you with respect, that you need some time without talking so you can put your emotions and thoughts in order. Make it clear it's not personal, just a need for space. If they respect you, even as a friend, they will understand. It also means asking mutual friends not to keep talking about that person. Every time they bring them up, it's another strike on your emotional strings that reignites your suffering. And of course, if you have easy access to their life through your phone or social media, it's just like the chocolate in your cupboard. Try creating barriers. Mute their profile, unfollow, or even temporarily deactivate accounts so their updates aren't at your fingertips. Why? Because each small contact triggers a tiny activation in your brain's pleasure circuit. Anything that activates that reward area, pleasure and motivation, can become a habit. Soon, you'll return to it, even if it's harmful. So here's this second tip, summed up: make it hard to contact them. Reduce or eliminate access. Mute, unfollow, delete contacts. Ask mutual friends not to share updates. Break the habit of checking. Create barriers. Put distance between you and those emotional triggers. Trust me, when this storm of negative energy passes and the sound of that emotional instrument finally fades, Two things can happen. You'll develop a respectful friendship, if you still care, or they'll no longer occupy your thoughts or your life. Both are valid outcomes. What matters is honoring your time and process. Sometimes you need to say a full or temporary goodbye. That's why one of my most watched videos is titled, The Importance of Saying Goodbye. I'll link it below. Saying goodbye, not forever necessarily, but for now, gives you space to sort your emotions, calm your mind, and allow time to pass so that emotional cord finally stops playing. You're not rejecting the person, you're protecting yourself, giving yourself the gift of distance. You're pausing the emotional stimulus to silence the sound, find your peace, and decide later what kind of relationship you actually want. If you want friendship, that's fine. If you want no contact, that's also fine. Your life, your choice. No one-size-fits-all answer here. Now I'll give you a third unusual tip. You might find it odd, but it really works. And many people who've taken my advice have messaged me saying it helped them a lot. If you're a longtime viewer here, you already know. Drop a comment below. I made it to the end and it was incredible. Or, the ending is the best part of the video. Here it is. When you feel the urge to check their social media or message them, or especially if they reach out after months to stroke their own ego, immediately stand up and move your body. Walk upstairs in your building, circle your block, walk around your office. Even better, go to the gym and truly exercise. Here's why. Physical activity shifts your focus. Your mind turns to your breath, your movement, your environment. It becomes harder to obsess over that person's updates. Exercise releases endorphins, natural painkillers in your body. They help reduce emotional pain, especially since heartbreak and physical pain involve similar brain circuits. So, if next time you catch yourself about to send that message or click on their profile, get up and move. Make it automatic. It helps break a sedentary habit, good for your health. It distracts your thoughts. It eases your emotional pain biologically. Here's another mental tip. When the urge for emotional crumbs arises, ask yourself, what would a person who has overcome this pain do right now? Would they message? Would they check social media? Would they allow crumbs? What would someone who's stuck in emotional pain do now? They'd likely reach out, relive the hurt, keep hoping, choose the first. Act according to who you want to be, not from who you feel like in that moment of pain. One of the best ways to escape emotional traps is to step out of the emotion of the moment. Look at the bigger picture and act based on your desired self. Yes, it sounds easy in talk, but I've been there. I know it's not easy. Far from it. Overcoming emotional pain is one of the hardest things we do. But if you've made it this far in this long video, it means you understand the complexity. And when you invest your effort in practicing these strategies and others you'll discover through reflection or friends' advice, here's the second thing I guarantee you. This painful cord will fade. Yes, it's temporary. Emotions arise when stimuli strike your strings, but then they fade until silence. But if you keep triggering that cord, reliving micro-pleasures, you'll only stretch out your pain. So yes, the temporary suffering of stepping away from harmful stimuli is worth it. You'll heal faster and more completely. Honestly, I know people who've been stuck in this rut for years. My friend, she's reached out to me many times, still chasing crumbs, convincing herself, this time it will be different. Dozens of times. But if you keep playing that emotional instrument, it never stops playing, and it keeps hurting. Remember, stop feeding the strings with even small stimuli. Give yourself time, honor your pain, but don't let it dictate your actions. Don't be your own emotional trash can. Quench the pain now so that silence and true peace can return. Always remember, you do not control what you feel, but you control what you do with what you feel. If this content had value for you, if it moved you, made you reflect, gave you clarity, I ask with gratitude, subscribe to the channel. If you're already subscribed, make sure to turn on the notification bell next to the subscribe button. That way you'll be notified every time a new video is published here. And since you're here, if you can, if you feel like it, if this video truly brought value to your life, please also click the like button. That helps a lot to ensure this knowledge reaches more people. People who, like you, are seeking real transformation. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this video. Truly, it was an honor to walk with you through such profound ideas. I hope this video has given you some ideas. Tiny choices you can make starting now to let that emotional cord fade, day by day, until the silence grows. And maybe one day soon, you'll find a new melody that brings joy and peace. This lesson isn't just for unrequited love. It applies to life. No matter what, there will always be people who don't like you, who won't return your feelings, who, despite your kindness, just aren't for you.